There are so many lenses out there. Canon, Sony, Sigma, vintage lenses, cinema lenses, zooms, primes. Some are $100 and some cost you more than your car. And when you're first starting out, it's honestly a little overwhelming. What do all these numbers mean? When I first got into filmmaking, I had no clue. But the more I learned, the more I realized how much your lens choice can shape the way your video looks and feels. So in this video, I'm gonna break it down and give you the basics of camera lenses, what the numbers mean, how they affect your image, and what kind of lens is right for the kind of stories you want to tell. Let's start with the front of the lens. You'll see something like this: FE4 70-200 G OSS, or FE4/PZ 16-35 G, or AF35/2.8 FE. What do those mean? Well, here's the breakdown. That first set of letters, like FE, we'll come back to that in a second. But the next number before the slash is your aperture. It controls how much light the lens lets in. Lower F number means a wider aperture. That gives you more light and more background blur, also known as shallow depth of field or bokeh. High F number means less light and more of your image in focus. Next set of numbers is your focal length. A lower number means a wider shot. Think GoPro or wide landscapes. A higher number means a tighter, more zoomed in shot, like sports or portraits. Somewhere in the middle, like 35 or 50, is pretty close to how our eyes naturally see things. And focal length also changes the way your scene feels. A wide lens like 16mm makes a space feel bigger. It exaggerates distance and makes things feel more immersive and dynamic, kind of like 0.5 on your iPhone. A long lens like 200mm compresses space, making the background feel closer to your subject. It's great for isolating people and giving that cinematic depth. But what does FE actually mean? That's where things get a little tricky. When it comes to Sony cameras, FE stands for full frame E-mount. This tells you that this lens is designed specifically for full frame Sony cameras. And that's important because not all cameras have the same sensor size or lens mount. If you're shooting on something like a Canon Rebel, Sony a6000 series, or a Fuji X series, you're probably using an APS-C sensor, which is smaller than full frame and changes how the lens behaves. Sony uses E-mount, Canon uses EF for DSLR and RF for mirrorless, Nikon uses F-mount for DSLRs and Z-mount for their mirrorless systems, Fuji uses X-mount, and Panasonic has micro four thirds. So always pay attention to the mount and make sure that the lens actually fits your camera. Another important aspect is something called crop factor. If you take a 35mm lens that's designed for a full frame camera and put it on an APS-C camera, that 35mm is going to look more like a 50mm lens in terms of field of view. The image will feel tighter, so just keep that in mind while you're picking a lens. While you're looking at the front of your lens, you'll also see a small number followed by mm, with a little circle and a line through it, something like 72. And that's the filter thread size. If you ever want to use ND filters, diffusion filters, or polarizers, that's the size you'll need, so always check that before buying a screw-on filter. Another thing to keep your eye out for is numbers that show you what the minimum focus distance is. That's the closest your lens can get to a subject while still staying sharp. So if you're filming product shots or close-ups and the lens just won't focus, you might be too close. All right, with that out of the way, let's talk about zoom lenses versus prime lenses. Prime lenses have a fixed focal length, so there's no zoom. If you want a different frame, you'll have to reposition the camera. They're usually sharper, let in more light, and have fewer moving parts. And depending on what you're looking for, they're often cheaper. Zoom lenses, on the other hand, let you change focal length, twist the ring, and reframe your shot without changing position. They're super convenient, great for events, weddings, or run-and-gun shooting. But unless you're spending good money, zoom lenses usually don't let in as much light. And here's one of the most important things to understand: fixed versus variable aperture. You might see two zoom lenses that look really similar. One says 24 to 70 f2.8 and the other says 18 to 55 f3.5 to 5.6. That second one has a variable aperture, which means as you zoom in, the aperture automatically stops down and lets in less light. And that can be frustrating when filming, especially if you're trying to keep a consistent exposure across one scene. A fixed aperture zoom like 24 to 70 f2.8 stays the same throughout the zoom range. That's why a kit lens like an 18 to 55 might cost under $100, while a fixed aperture lens might cost 10 times that much. The difference in performance and consistency is noticeable, and in my opinion, worth it. Variable aperture lenses aren't necessarily bad, they're just more limited. So if you're looking to buy your first lens or upgrade from a kit lens, here's what I'd recommend. Start with a cheap prime lens, something with a pretty low aperture value, like a nifty 50 or a 35 f2.8. These are pretty affordable, they're bright, sharp, and they'll teach you a ton about framing and lighting and depth of field. If you need more flexibility, look into a 28 to 75 f2.8 from Tamron, a 24 to 105 f4, or a 24 to 70 f2.8. That's what I shoot on like 100% of the time. These are all fixed aperture lenses and cover a wide range of situations. Just keep in mind they're more expensive, but the difference in quality is noticeable. And here's a saying you'll hear all the time in filmmaking. You date your camera and you marry your lenses. That's because camera bodies change constantly. New models come out every year, but lenses stick around. You can use the same lens for 10 years and still get beautiful results. They hold their value. They make a bigger difference in the final image than most camera upgrades. So if you're going to invest in something good, invest in some good glass. If you learned something in this video, stick around. I've got more tips on how to get the most out of your camera gear without spending a fortune. And if you don't know what lens to get, let me know in the comments below and I'll help you choose one based on what you're shooting.